son of a bitch. Let's do this.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Latirzo, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by smiling Jack Hirsch, former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. Jack, how are you tonight? You got to turn your sound on.
I'm looking at the comment by Little Holmes in the house. I thought it said Jets Rock, gentlemen, before I realized it said Let's Rock. So it just shows you the way I'm kind of getting ready.
Little Holmes is my man, Jack. He's the biggest Larry Holmes fan there is. And all I can say is I am going to have a post up this week, sir, that you will want to participate in, Little Holmes. I'll tell you this much. I haven't even told Jack about it. Maybe we'll mention it on the show as we get into a topic that we didn't plan on talking about, but because I was in such a heated debate with someone today, it might be something worth kicking around. Hello, Joe Bergman. How about them Phillies? Didn't they lose 2 out of 3 to the Braves? That's a beautiful thing.
Okay, Frank. Okay, let's talk boxing. Love went off. What do you want to start off with? Do you want to?
Let's start off with something that we beat to death, Jack, but I have an opinion on it, and that's
not Fury and Usyk. Just not Fury and Usyk.
No. The decision in the O'Shaquie Foster fight. I cannot say the guy's last name. I leave that up for you. How do you say Robeson? Consacao. Okay.
But the point is,
in that junior lightweight title.
How did you score that fight, Frank? Did you score it?
Jack, here's what happened. Saturday night was a beautiful night. I got home from the shore, so I wouldn't fall asleep. I took a ride on my motorcycle around 9 o'clock, figuring that I'll get back and I'll catch the main event. Went for a nice ride, no traffic on the road, loving life. Come back, and that fight's just starting. I scored it 9-3. There's no question that Foster won the fight, and I am tired. We have said for years, Jack, that these bad decisions result from one thing. And I don't want to drag you into this because I'm not sure you've said this, but I've said for years, and many other, including your friend Teddy Atlas, have said it's either corruption or it's ineptness, the way they score the fights, okay? And I've come to the conclusion that it has to be ineptness, because if it was corruption, they would pick their spots better and they would be more judicious with the bad decisions and whatnot. This just has to be ineptness. Mark Kriegel, I'm not the biggest fan of his. He had it 11-1. I don't think it was quite that one-sided, but I think 9-3, 8-4, giving Consentio the benefit of every doubt. Bad decision, Jack. No doubt about who won the fight.
Frank, I would have to watch the fight again. I scored it watching it live the same way as you did, 9-3, 117, 111. But there has to be an asterisk next to my scoring. I did something I've never done before during the fight. You know,
watch it with their eyes open?
No, with kind of, I wish I had a couple extras to watch it that were open. You see in other sports like football, the split screen, someone's watching a few games at once. For the first time in my life, I watched 2 fights at the same time because I was watching the TV screen, ESPN, the O'Shaquie Foster fight, and
right.
And William Cepeda was fighting on the zone at the same time. So here I am My eyes are going back and forth between my iPad and the TV. I'm holding up the iPad, looking at the TV. Not the best way to score fights. So in other words, the Cepeda fight lasted 3 rounds. So let's say for argument's sake, it interfered with my scoring in 3 of the rounds with the Foster fight. And I don't remember how I scored those 3 rounds. I mean, I vaguely recall giving Foster 2, Canseco 1 during the Cepeda fight. But the big issue is this now. Don Majewski called me today. You know, to me, he's the top historian in the world, international agent. And he told me he's always been a proponent of open scoring. And all of a sudden, an idea popped into my head that never popped into my head before. Why don't we have open scoring, but only let the fighters and their corner know? No one else knows. This way, the spectators have the suspense of the decision, but the fighters know what's going on in the corner. And I wouldn't even want the commissioner to know, because can you imagine the score? We were having open scoring during this fight. I could see Larry Hazzard going over to the judges and saying, "What the heck are you guys doing? Are you out of your mind? How can you score the round for so-and-so?" And then they would kind of tilt towards the other way. So, I mean, there's no good solution outside of having really good judges in there. But if I'm going to play devil's advocate and I'm going to say the decision was fair, let me play devil's advocate for one moment, okay? Foster, in reality, didn't do much more than land jabs. He'd land the occasional punch otherwise, but he wasn't putting together like combinations that were eye-catching. He just wasn't getting hit for the most part, and he was pecking away and scoring a little bit now and then without really ever getting hit. Canseco threw, if we're to believe CompuBox's totals, something like 265 more punches, Frank. It reminds me of the student who went to school, would fail 3 out of his 4 exams during the year, but never missed the class, and the teacher kind of passed him by on effort. You know, shouldn't be, but if he really threw 265 more punches, you know, it means he was at least really trying to force the fight, trying to land a little more maybe than the other guy. And that's playing devil's advocate. I think Foster won. I think it was a robbery, you know, but what can I say?
Jack, boxing is probably the only sport where the participants really don't know the score at the time. So I don't have a problem with open scoring, and I can see your issue with the Larry Hazzard jumping up and saying, "What are you guys watching?" But maybe that would put the judges more on their A game if they knew that. However, Canseco, whatever his name, I'm going to call him Canseco. He did not do anything. I can't remember a solid punch that he really landed that was meaningful over the course of the fight. So, and Punch Stat, Jack, remember, I don't like Punch Stat because, as Bob Arum said today, they're not even there at the fight when they do that. They miss a lot of punches, and one guy can be really busy in one round and overload the CompuBox score for one round, and then it reflects the whole fight, which is not a good picture of it. But at the end of the day, this was not a difficult fight to score. This was not a Bernard Hopkins, Jermaine Taylor fight where it was difficult to differentiate the rounds. So I don't know what the problem is, Jack. I'm starting to think it's ineptness, because if it was corruption, they would be better at it.
But the thing about it is the 2 judges who scored it for Canseco, chances are they're going to continue to get work. It happens. Yep. I'm okay with a veteran judge who has a really good track record having the occasional off night. They should never have an off night because it's harmful to one of the fighters. Okay, so they should really never have an off night. But if I'm giving assignments, I have to evaluate them. I understand they're human. We all score a fight that goes against the grain now and then, and I've done it. And for me to find out when I'm wrong, I ask a number of people. And if they all start disagreeing with me, people who I respect, I have to come to the conclusion I really, missed something here. It could happen, but judges turn in bad scores in big fights, and they continue to get assignments the same way, like nothing happened, and we forget about it. Even right now, they were two relatively new judges who scored that fight for Canseco. I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but I'm going to tell you what, Frank, I'm guilty too, because some time is going to go by. They're going to get an assignment in a big fight, and I'm not going to be outraged about it because I'll kind of have moved on. You would have moved on. Everyone would have moved on in a certain sense, and it's just flat out wrong. There should
Jack,
be a committee evaluating these judges and deciding and rate them like we rate pound for pound fighters. We should rate judges maybe.
The NFL does it. The NFL does it. They have the best judges for the playoffs and referees. Jack, I hate to belabor this, but when he's right, he's right. And Atlas has gone on since he has been on ESPN Air about how getting this wrong changes careers and lives. And these guys, every time they go into the ring, they come out a little less than what they were. And to get cheated on a decision, it sets your career back. It's just such an injustice, and it sets your career back in so many ways. They just have to do something about it, Jack. But the problem is, boxing, as we both know, has become a secondary sport. And unlike the NFL, nobody's going to care about it. But if it was big like the NFL, they would do something. Look at the playoff game between the Rams and the Saints a couple years ago on that pass interference call that wasn't called. And what did they do because of that one play? They changed the game where now they can go back and look at it. Okay? It's crazy. But because boxing is a second-tier sport, like you said, everybody will forget about it by this weekend, and then Boots will fight, and if he looks good, everybody will be talking about that. And who's Canelo going to fight? Then Crawford's going to fight a couple of weeks later, and people are just going to get lost.
I wrote about that when Maxi Hughes was ripped off against George Kambosos. Maxi Hughes won the fight. Kambosos got the decision, and what did they do to Maxi Hughes after that? They throw him in with William Cepeda, and they reward George Kambosos with the Lomachenko fight. So George Kambosos was treated as if he won, and he's getting the big fight. And Maxi Hughes is being given a consolation prize, basically against a guy everyone knew he would beat him. You know, a guy who was a riser, up and coming, and the pay probably wasn't too good for Maxi Hughes, compared to what it would have been had he been in with a guy like Lomachenko. But, that's what we do. I mean, it's unfortunate.
It's not going to change. It's not going to change. And you know what's funny? Like most things with boxing, a lot of it is who you know, and they're the people that get the jobs and so forth. And it's just an old boys network, and the guys who know the guys, they just like, the gang is here, and they just keep on pushing to their guys. I think I told you this story before. I tried to get a license to be a judge, and they wanted me to drive all over Pennsylvania and score amateur fights to prove my worth as a judge. And I said to the guys in power at that time, I said, look, I watched more boxing and have a better insight than all your judges put together. And if you need to test me on that, the heck with it. And I never did it.
Judge once said to me, it was a nice conversation. He questioned me too, but it was a friendly conversation. It wasn't hostile at all. He said, I'm a trained judge. Like, to prove to me, he has the credentials more so than me. So I said, yeah, but you were trained by a guy who knows less than me. So you're a trained judge by, who the heck trained, whatever. The guy who's training you because you went to a seminar and you were told, well, clean punching is the number one criteria. Come on. I mean, but listen, and then they use the line, well, scoring is subjective. It's a matter of opinion. So, I mean, come on, enough's enough. It seems like,
Jackie.
Frank, every other show we're complaining about scoring in fights. Even if the right guy gets the decision, is he being given it by way too wide of a margin? Sometimes the judges are so all over the place. But but the Foster fight against Canseco, that it was a shock. It was a
Jack,
real shock.
Here's another example of why I don't do more things in public with boxing and go to more shows and participate in more things. I'm not going to say who it is, although I'll tell you off the air. I wrote an article about a fighter who had just retired, had been retired a while, and he's a great fighter. I didn't think he was getting enough ink. I wrote one of the best articles on him that I've ever seen, and I sent it to Ring Magazine. They never acknowledged me, okay? So at a fight card, I went up to the person that makes the decision at Ring Magazine, and I said, hey, blah, blah, blah. You got my article, didn't you? And he said, yes. I said, didn't you like it? And he said, no. He goes, it was very good. He goes, I said, well, why didn't you use it? He said, Frank, he goes, it's kind of hard to get into the magazine, in a boxing magazine. And I said, wait a second. I said, you mean to tell me it's a boxing magazine? I said, do you think that you have anybody on your staff that writes more compelling articles than me or knows more about this sport than me? And he didn't say anything. And I says, let me tell you something else too. I says, half the guys on your staff email me a couple times a week and ask me my opinions on certain fighters. I said, you know what I see? The next time the magazine comes out, I see my words under their byline. I said, instead of telling me it's hard to get in the magazine, why don't you just tell me I'm not one of the boys, and no matter what I write, you're just not going to use it? The guy's jaw dropped to the floor, Jack. I walked away, and that was pretty much, I never sent them another article again. But it was like, his guys, Jack, emailed me, Frank, what do you think of this guy? Well, and I'd be a nice guy, say this, and this. Okay. And then they write it under their byline, but yet I couldn't get in the magazine.
Okay,
So
Frank, okay, Frank. I mean, no, I know where you're coming from. Enough about bad decisions on the fighters and the one done to you. Shakur Stevenson, what did you take out of his fight this weekend?
Immensely talented, gifted. Jack, immensely talented and gifted. Not a great fighter. Stopped using his jab. I mean, is he a puncher? No. But you know what? As Ali said years ago, you only have to punch hard enough to win. He does do that, but he's just not going to be big time, Jack, until he gives people a reason to watch him. As good as he is, they want to see more than just his defense.
Tried. No, he tried to be entertaining. Let's give him his due. Not in the early rounds. In the early rounds, he was calculating. But the second half of the fight, he really was trying to open up. I tried to gauge Shakur's maturity level, and his grades were so-so. Where he failed to me was in his excuse, saying his opponent didn't want to fight. He says, well, I can't knock out a guy who doesn't want to fight, who just wants to survive. And Haratanayanan, I saw him take the fight to Shakur a lot of the time.
Yes.
I saw him move forward to Shakur. No embarrassment for Shakur. He couldn't get him out of there. He won by a very wide margin. He looked, you could say he even looked good. I mean, it wasn't the type of performance that leaves you with your mouth open, because we expected more. We expected the stoppage. We expected him to, make a statement, look sensational in a way, and he didn't do it. And it was his last fight for Top Rank. And he admitted, Shakur, he was trying hard to get his guy out of there. Kudos to Shakur for at least admitting that. and he said, well, I have to do a better job of cutting off the ring. I'm going to work on that. I don't think that was his problem.
Not at
Cutting
all,
the ring
Jack. The
off.
other guy was carrying the fight.
Yeah, but Shakur is great if he fights within a boring style. Okay, it's unfortunate, but he shuts down opponents. Mayweather was rarely exciting. He would once in a while he would be in a contest where there'd be some rounds that were really entertaining, but Mayweather wasn't.
But he would let it, Jack, at the lower weights, Floyd would let his hands go a little bit more and give you some more offense. And to me, that was a big problem with Shakur. He just, once he had some success to the body, he was married to that for a while. Then he abandoned it. Then he abandoned the jab and he looked for one shot. And he's not a one shot guy. He looked like he had a little Howard Davis in him.
Yeah, well, sure, but Shakur, is he a complete fighter? You could say more so than not. But what's there for Shakur? His contract with Top Rank is run out. Top Rank offered him reportedly 5 fights, $3 million per fight. It's a good deal, except if he was going to get a big pay-per-view fight, obviously he'd have to get paid a lot more than that. You know, if he was going to get a fight with Tank, he's not going to fight for $3 million. I mean, but I'm sure Top Rank would pay him a lot more than that in that eventuality. But what's out there for him?
Jack, there's two guys.
And then, the two guys, don't tell me Tank Davis, because even Tank Davis isn't going to rush to fight Shakur.
You think after the other night, you think he'd have trepidation? I don't.
I think he absolutely would have trepidation. I'm not saying he doesn't think he'd beat Shakur and knock him out. If I'm handling Tank Davis, I still regard Shakur as a real threat. That's close to being a 50-50.
Absolutely.
So why listen, if you're Tank, you're about to fight Lomachenko anyway. Today, Shakur's so far off your radar because the Lomachenko fight's going to make Tank big money. And after Lomachenko, if he beats Lomachenko, he's going to have an easier type opponent, you know, before even looking in Shakur's direction. So Shakur would be in the distant future. Who's
Jack?
The other guy besides Tank?
No, there are two guys out there that give credibility to Tank and to Shakur. Them fighting each other and Lomachenko. Anybody that Tank beats, aside from Shakur or Lomachenko, the critics, like our buddy Mac, are going to come on him and say, well, that guy wasn't any good, and who'd he beat? And the same things with Shakur, no matter if he doesn't beat Lomachenko or Tank, he's just not going to get credit for his wins. And that's why I could see Shakur with the mindset of saying, if I can get the fight with Tank and I beat him, then I pull the Mayweather like he did with De La Hoya, and then he's big time. And Tank is probably in the same position, but Tank's in a better position because he pretty much, it looks like he's going to fight Lomachenko. And then if he beats Lomachenko, that gives him all the leverage in a fight with Shakur. Now, is Shakur going to take that? Is he going to bet on himself against Tank, who has defeated Lomachenko? And that would make it what? That would make it a unified fight, right?
Well, if you get the unification, I think Shakur wants big fights. Unification fights are the nonsense. The word undisputed is one of the stupidest words.
But the fans buy it, Jack, and it does numbers.
They buy it because the fans, not on this show. You know what I like about this show, Frank? And I mean this. I'm not just saying it. We have the most knowledgeable people listening to this show. We really do. I look at the comments. The people.
Other than that MacMan guy, I would agree.
I know they really know their stuff, and I read the comments. I don't always comment back, but I read the comments, and I find myself learning from the listeners. You know, they have good viewpoints. But the word the undisputed, whoever gets an undisputed so title, they're going to get stripped of it a little while anyway. We got to know who the real champions are per division or the top fighters, etc. And Shakur might have to move up and wait. Look, you know what Top Rank could have given him? They could have given him a Teofimo Lopez fight at junior welterweight, for example. But for whatever reason, Top Rank is running it like a business. They're not throwing money around loosely.
And I don't think they're crazy about Shakur going to 140, Jack.
Well, they don't have him under contract anyway now. They have nothing to lose, but they're not. And I thought the other name you were going to mention would be Devin Haney, perhaps. Maybe Haney now needs any type of big fight he could get. And if Shakur's there, if the money's there, Eddie Hearn has shown interest in Shakur. He wants Shakur to come over to Matchroom. Devin Haney and Eddie Hearn, even though they don't have a contract, there's a relationship there. Not always good, but sometimes good. So maybe that's a fight that could be made. Shakur against Devin Haney, perhaps. Do you want to know something?
And what does he get out of beating Devin Haney, Jack? Everybody will say that Garcia just kicked his butt. What's the big deal with that? Even though it was overturned and he's back to being undefeated, Devin Haney now looks like a damaged fighter with no chin. If Shakur beats him, they're going to say, well, you beat a guy that Garcia went through.
Mac, you're a traditionalist, yet you wimp out on weight classes. Like when guys used to weigh 135 lightweight, they would move up to welterweight. You wouldn't have had a problem with it in the past. But because the junior welterweight division is more important now than it was when it first started, you feel, well, go up in these little increments. It'd be a great fight. When Garcia's suspension is lifted, and it might not even last till April because there's ways to get around it. All he has to do is go to rehab for a couple of weeks, say he's clean. Mauricio Suleiman will sanction him, in the meantime. Garcia against Shakur, that would be a big pay-per-view fight. Garcia's a pay-per-view magnet. Now, like him or not, he's a pay-per-view magnet.
At 135, that's a big fight, yes.
At 147, let Shakur move up and down weight. 147, make it,
Jack, you act like moving up in weight is no big deal and everybody can just eat another cheesesteak or something. Jack, it's a big deal. Those 5 pounds are a big thing. Why did Garcia come in heavy? Why do these guys try to win on the scale? Look what Mayweather did to Marquez. Same thing. That's a big deal. Fighters fight about what weight they're going to fight out more than they fight about money.
Shakur wouldn't have to make weight. He could be strong at 147, and Garcia.
He's not strong at 135. How would he be strong at 147?
Maybe he wouldn't have to make weight. But the point, with that type of logic, Emil Griffith would have never jumped up from welterweight to challenge Dick Tiger at middleweight. Dick Tiger wouldn't have moved up from middleweight to challenge Jose Torres at light heavyweight. You would have said,
Jack, you're talking about Emil Griffith, one of the greatest fighters in history. We're not talking about guys of that ilk yet.
Give Shakur a chance to show his greatness. Maybe he'll show you he's another Pernell Whitaker when all is said and done. Maybe. I wouldn't. In other words, the jury.
Shakur will never go near Garcia above 135.
If it's Shakur Stevenson desperately wants a big fight, Mac, in the worst way. It always depends who the opponent is,
Well, Jack, he also wants to give himself a chance to win. Garcia's what, 5'8" and a half? Look how much bigger he is. He would carry that weight so much better. Garcia would have all the confidence in the world going against Shakur at welterweight. That would be like Garcia fighting Crawford at welterweight. He would get mutilated.
Let me put it this way. Would you agree if Shakur fought Garcia 147, Garcia had to make the weight, no shenanigans coming in over the weight. He has to make the weight legitimately. And Shakur obviously would comfortably make the weight, 147. He'd come in at about 145 or whatever, 146. Wouldn't you say it's a 50-50 fight?
I would tell you that and try to bet as much as I could to try to get you to make that bet with me. And I would take Garcia, and I would try to talk you into taking Shakur.
Okay.
I just think the weight is too big of a deal. Okay, Joe Bergman said Garcia's 5'10", and I don't think that's a reach. I said 5'8", maybe a shade over. He's 5'10". He is he was very tall and lightweight. And by the way, Joe Bergman, don't kiss up to Mac, because Mac hates Philly teams as much as I do or more. Poor Mac. I love you, buddy. He hates the Eagles more than I do. He's a Giants fan.
No, I'm looking at, it's not on the screen, a comment by Joe Bergman. He says, why wouldn't Tank want Shakur? I believe he's definitely the better fighter. I kind of get the feeling long-term Tank is a little the better fighter. I've always felt all along Shakur Stevenson would beat Tank Davis.
So Frank was right again?
No, I've always felt... No,
Frank has been telling you about Tank for a long time.
I've always felt Shakur had the most difficult style to solve. He has a shutdown style. And but something about Tank, he's kind of like a genius in the ring, the way Roberto Duran was.
And he has power and speed.
Duran had it up here.
And and Tank has power and speed.
Exactly. I mean, could Shakur beat Tank Davis? Absolutely. But do I now think he would? I'm kind of leaning towards Tank now. It's still up in the air. I was hoping Shakur would show me a little more Saturday. Get his guy out, completely dominate, no problems. You could argue he did dominate in a sense. As far as winning rounds, he dominated. But it was a fight. He didn't outclass his opponent, in my view. He dominated him, but didn't outclass him. Difference.
You're right, Jack. Look, as I said, Shakur skilled, absolutely terrific defensively, great boxing brain. Again, he punches hard enough to win. He's just not going to be a star, and I can't say he's great. And it's nice to hear you, who has been taking shots at me on this show since we've been doing it, about being a Tank Davis apologist. Apparently, Frankie was right that Tank is a special fighter. And the guy we're going to talk about in a little bit, Boots Ennis, is even better than Tank.
Get off Boots Ennis for 1 second. I can't believe us, Frank, how neglectful we were. We were talking about who Tank could fight. There is a guy out there like William Cepeda, who fought Saturday night. Okay, William Cepeda. He stopped the fighter Giovanni Cabrera in 3 rounds. Cabrera came to fight. Was actually effective in the first round, but Cepeda is kind of a smoking Joe Frazier.
I was watching the other fight, so I missed that.
No.
And Cepeda throws a lot of punches.
Punches nonstop. I think Shakur beats him, but he's a viable opponent, and he's a threat. And if you ask me the odds who would win, who'd lose, I'd say 75-25, 80-20 Shakur, meaning, Cepeda is in with a legitimate chance to upset him. Cepeda's promoted by Golden Boy. Shakur's a free agent. Does he sign with Golden Boy for 3 fights just for that match to be made? But Cepeda's not that well known to the public yet. He's known to us and the hardcore boxing fans. It doesn't really quite make it a pay-per-view attraction.
I don't think Shakur signs with anybody, Jack. I think he's going to try to go the Mayweather route and be a free agent. He just doesn't have the cachet that Floyd had at that time. And Floyd had about 37 fights at that time. And he had some big fights under his belt.
Before we get to Boots, too, there was a couple other fights. I just want to mention them very quickly. Especially one, Johnny Fisher, a heavyweight matchroom, Eddie Hearn. He stopped the fight at Alan Babick in like 36 seconds. So they're giving him the build-up in England. He's 12-0, 11 KOs. And another fight that really slipped under the radar, I didn't see it, it was on pay-per-view, Danny Jacobs against Shane Mosley Jr.
I didn't see that either.
Danny Jacobs, 37 years old. I knew he was past it. I'm not just saying it till after the show, because his last fight against John Ryder, he lost. And I don't want to hear it was a bad decision. It was close. You dominated John Ryder. Danny Jacobs has been living off the money he's been making in other big fights. and I guess he, wanted to come back. He had a goal of getting inducted in the Hall of Fame in Canastota. He got outpointed comprehensively, from what I heard. Danny Jacobs, so his career is really over, and he shouldn't fight again.
I didn't see that fight, Jack, but you saw it?
No, I didn't see it.
Okay.
No.
I have one question regarding that fight. I want to know who paid for that. That was who paid to see Shane Mosley Jr. fight 37-year-old Danny Jacobs? That's what I want to know.
UFC guys, no, they won the same card as the UFC guys who were boxing. Nate Diaz and
okay.
Masvidal. So if you're a UFC fan, they were joining the UFC show in a.
So they paid for the Diaz fight basically, and then got the other one.
Yeah, but if they were paying for that, they're missing the ESPN show and they're missing the show on the Zone. Even though the show on the Zone, the only fight that was really interesting was the Cepeda fight, But the ESPN had a nice little show, with good, a couple of good fights as a lead-in, before the main event. They had a 4-fight show.
I didn't see the Zone card, Jack. I only saw the ESPN card.
Yeah, I just caught the Cepeda fight, on the Zone. It was going on the same time as O'Shaquie Foster was getting a raw deal. But you wanted to talk about your guy, Boots Ennis, who our producer, Mac, he's not on the air now, but he wanted to call you out on the Mac and Jack Sports Show. And I told him to hold off a little bit till he speaks to you. He says Laterzo's been exposed by being an apologist for Terence Crawford because he felt Laterzo keeps saying, Crawford shouldn't have to fight Boots. It's not good for business. He can't make a lot of money right now. Why do it? But meanwhile, he's fighting Israel Madrimov. He'd make more money for fighting Boots Ennis than he would Madrimov, Frank. So he, as much as we revere Crawford and we both think he's great, he is kind of ducking Boots. Let's be honest about it.
All right, Jack, you want honesty? Let me just ask you this. And Mac, I know you can hear this. If Crawford and Boots fought Saturday night, this coming Saturday night, and it's a close fight for about 8 rounds, and in rounds 9 and 10, Crawford takes him apart and takes him out, are you really going to give him credit for beating Boots? A guy who gets all his props because, as you said earlier, it's based on potential, and everybody who we respect all think the kid's the real deal. But at the end of the day, if they fight and Crawford took him apart, nobody would say how great Crawford was. They would go back and they look at Boots' record and they realize the only guy who they recognize is the guy he's going to fight Saturday night. And they only know about Avavasian is because he got knocked out by Crawford. Crawford has nothing to win by beating Boots or fighting Boots, and everything to lose if he loses. And there's just not enough money in there to take the risk.
And I throw the Canelo factor at you. I heard an interview today with Canelo Alvarez saying, he's saying he would beat David Benavidez easily. No problem at all. He'd beat him easy, but it's not a big fight. Benavidez.
He's wrong though, Jack.
But that's what he's saying. He's saying he'd get no credit for it, Canelo. And then again, think of the
That's
Canelo
not true.
Going back when Canelo was young. Mayweather beats Canelo. Did Mayweather truly get credit for it? Revisionist thinking that didn't give Mayweather credit when Canelo got to be really at the top of his game. When Canelo was regarded as the number 1 fighter pound for pound in the world, the perception was, well, Mayweather beat a green version of Canelo. And I'll agree, Canelo did get
that's true, but it's still a big win.
But it was still a good version of Canelo he beat. He still beat a good version of Canelo. And I have a confession to make, Frank. I don't just come out after fight saying, I told you, and take credit. I thought Canelo was going to beat Mayweather. I thought he was going to beat Mayweather. And I
picked Mayweather to win that fight, Jack, for 2 reasons. Canelo was green, and I knew if there was any chance Mayweather could lose, he wouldn't have taken the fight. He took it at the exact perfect time. That's why Floyd is the greatest manager in the history of the game. I never had a doubt in my mind that Mayweather was going to win that fight. He knew what he was doing. Canelo got much better after that fight. He brought him down to 152. If you ever see the picture of those two at the weigh-in, Canelo looks like somebody that had a bad drug problem and hadn't eaten for 2 months.
Canelo's next move, it's either going to be Chris Eubank or Edgar Berlanga. Please spare me Edgar Berlanga. Edgar Berlanga has no chance of beating Canelo.
It's going to be Berlanga, though, Jack.
Anyone who steps in the ring, okay, hypothetically has a chance. I understand that, okay? Believe me, Berlanga could throw a chopping right hand. He has some power in the right hand and maybe hits Canelo perfectly, and I think the chances of that happening are slightly better than if I bought a lottery ticket of me winning, okay? Slightly better. Okay?
Berlanga has no shot against Canelo.
No at all.
Neither does Eubank.
At least Chris Eubank, you could say maybe a 10% chance in there if he fights the perfect fight. But Berlanga can fight the perfect fight. He just doesn't. And Berlanga's not gonna. He'll go down fighting. That's the best thing I could say. As he's getting knocked out, he's exchanging blows. It kind of reminded me a little of.
It's going to be Berlanga, Jack, because he's undefeated. He's a puncher, and he just checks more boxes than Eubank, who is not undefeated, who isn't very likable. Berlanga is not likable either, but I just think Berlanga is a better story, and that's who it's going to be. And
Eubank's a far better fighter than Berlanga. Don't make any mistake there. I don't think Berlanga's. Eubank is a far better fighter than Berlanga. Berlanga's just another guy. He's really mediocre. Eubank at least.
If Berlanga and Eubank fought, who would you pick?
Oh, Eubank. Yeah, no, Eubank without any real problems.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure who I would pick. I think that's a closer fight than you think. I do. I think Berlanga could rise up to the occasion and maybe manhandle Eubank. But the bottom line is Berlanga is a better story than Eubank. I think that's where the fight will win. But Jack, Canelo is wrong about Benavidez compared to Crawford and Boots. There are a lot of people that think maybe it's even over 50% who think Benavidez could beat Canelo. Okay? There's nobody that would pick Boots to beat Bud. They want to see the fight, but there's nobody that would pick him if that fight was signed tonight.
Odds. Let's predict what the odds would be. If Benavidez fought Canelo, I think the opening line would favor Benavidez something like 7-5. Is that fair to say? The opening line, and then it would be up to the bettors to move the line.
Jack, I'm not sure. I think it would be a pick 'em, and I wouldn't be surprised if Canelo was a slight favorite.
Possibly. Oh, well, who knows? Now, if Boots fought Crawford, I think you're talking about maybe 3-1, 3.5-1. Bud starts as a favorite. That's
Jack, I think it's closer than that. I think it's 9-5, 2-1 at the most.
Wow. If Bud's fighting Boots, okay, let's switch to Boots is fighting Saturday night. It depends how Boots looks Saturday night. He has to make a statement. It's a statement. David Avanazin, who's fighting a guy who he should knock out, guy who he should dominate. He has to make a statement. And
Avanazin hasn't fought since he fought Bud.
And got knocked out.
December 2022.
And he looked good against Bud in the early rounds. He did. He gave him a fight till eventually Bud solved the puzzle the way he always does and then took over and then knocked him out cold. But he's got to make a statement. winning a decision in this fight, even you win every round, doesn't do it.
No.
You want people to come away saying, "Oh, what a talent! This guy's outstanding." You want some people to think that this guy has a real chance of beating Bud Crawford. That's the statement that Boots Ennis has to make.
And that's why, to me, Jack, it's an easy fight to pick. Bud got him in 6 rounds. The fight will not go past the 6 rounds. And I think, and I see Joe just posted it goes Boots in 5. Joe, I think that's a good pick. In fact, I actually set that as the over. It might even be before that. Boots knows everybody's going to make the correlation between how he did against Avanasian and how Crawford did, even though it's a year and a half later.
Well, it's a little unfair because Bud knocked out the same opponent whose Boots is fighting. So if Boots does a better job, in a way you could argue that Bud set the table for that to happen.
But at the worst, Boots has to beat him in Bud time or sooner to keep it. Jackie, if he goes 10 rounds and it takes him 10 rounds, I think so.
If he wins every round and Boots, stops him in 8 or 9 rounds, completely dominates from start to end, and no harm done. No harm done.
All right, we disagree a little bit, and that's why we do the show, Jack. But I say this. Boots is aware of all this, and he knows the fans and the critics and the pundits will be looking at that. And the fact is, Boots is in his prime, entering his prime, fighting a guy who has not been busy, who was softened up by Bud. Boots has to beat him sooner, I think, for them to keep pushing the narrative. If he struggles with him or goes a lot of rounds with him, that dulls the shine a little bit, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, but I look for Boots to put on a showcase.
Does he get him? When does he get him? Before or after 6?
Before.
Okay.
Yeah,
so we're in agreement on that.
Let's say Boots in 4 rounds, 3 or 4, early KO, but okay on that. But let me ask you, Mayweather, we were talking about him before. Let's talk about Mayweather, the promoter. His promotional company's falling apart. He brought in Richard Schaefer to try to salve things. He's been losing fighters. He lost Tank Davis. That was his big meal ticket. I mean, and Mayweather Promotions, they were never really promoting a big show. You would think he would be able to hold on to Tank by doing a co-promotion with one of the other big name promoters. But Mayweather, the promoter, he reminds me, Frank, of Michael Jordan, the NBA owner. It's not the same. I mean, and his company's really floundering, and I don't see him signing. He has one really good fighter, Kamal Moten. It's a kid
big puncher,
18 years old, who's supposed to be a major star in the future, who's still being loyal to Floyd. But the other fighters have left. They just weren't getting the fights that they wanted. But Moten is sticking, with them. And, who knows what the future is going to be as Floyd as a fighter. You get the feeling Mayweather's not as financially secure as made out to be. I mean, obviously he has enough money to live comfortably on the rest of his life, but I get the feeling he no longer has the type of money to live that crazy lifestyle that he'd been living.
Jack, I always felt that they overestimated his worth and how much he was made for certain fights. But look, he has to have grossed about $600 or $700 million. How he could ever be in trouble financially, just the interest on that alone, in a safe investment, in a conservative investment, the money, you just can't go through the money.
Well, why is
he
fighting the exhibitions, Frank? Is it because of money or his ego? He has to be in the limelight.
I think it's his ego.
Need an audience, but not risk his record. Not if Mayweather, hypothetically, he's not. I seriously doubt that he would ever do it. Okay, the only way he would ever do it is if he was absolutely flat broke and had no real choice. Well, you always have a choice. If he returned to the ring for real, hypothetically, okay, what would be the biggest money fight for him out there? Not who would be the best opponent, not who we would want to see him fight the most. What would be the most marketable fight out there where he could make the biggest financial killing possible?
Either Crawford or Tank.
If I threw a couple of other names at you, if I don't, you're gonna laugh. What happens if the fight doesn't have to make sense from a boxing standpoint. It's what people would pay. If I said Jake Paul.
I mean, that would be hard to beat, Jack. You're right. That would be a tough one. You're right. That's in the conversation.
He'd make Paul lose some weight. He'd weigh whatever he wanted, you know, or a Pacquiao rematch. I know it's not nearly what, you know. But
well, Pacquiao is talking about coming back to fight, right?
Yeah, I mean, they decided to do it again. It's the brand. The brand
that would sell. That would sell.
But Mayweather, again, he's only going to win exhibitions. He's not going to want to risk his record, and he makes it clear. Even when he wins the exhibition match, Mayweather never adds it to his record because he's setting himself up for the future just in case there's some tiny chance of a slip up. You know, it doesn't count, you know, the way he's saying it. But if Mayweather really ever gets tapped out, it's just like Mayweather might say, the heck with my unbeaten record. You know, people understand. I just got to make the money. Like I'm going to, you know, I can't take this anymore. I'm down to $10 million.
Jack, I saw you have a little interaction with a guy on my page about Chisora and Joe Joyce.
Yeah.
And I think he said that Chisora is what, plus 300?
Yeah. He feels Chisora is going to upset Joe Joyce because if you saw Joe Joyce's last couple of fights, especially the last one when he won, he was the slowest fight I've maybe seen in my life in that fight. Butterbean looked quick compared to him. I mean, he was slow, he was laboring, but you know, he got the job done. Unless Chisora is completely shot, he's a tough man. He's going to take it to Joyce. Joyce just strikes me as not being as durable anymore as he was.
No, Dang really did put a hole in that.
Right. I just feel, and Joyce is an older guy. Joyce is in his late 30s. People are looking at Chisora, oh, he's old and this. Well, Joyce is old. From a boxing standpoint, yes, the punishment he's taking. Chisora's had a lot of wars, we hear. But those Zhang fights, man, they look like they aged Joyce. He's not the same fighter that beat
And Joyce took a ton of punches in the fights he won, too.
Right. He was so
Who would you pick if Joyce fought Joseph Parker again?
Parker, easy.
Parker, probably?
Yeah. I mean, that's a fight that you could put the Saudis underneath pay-per-view if you want to keep Parker winning. Now there's talk with Deontay Wilder, the guy who Parker beat. Well, I mean, and then Wilder got knocked out by Zhang, or Wilder fighting at, you know, for the Bridgerweight title or whatever. And Wilder's through. He's a shot fighter. I said that.
You know, Jack, it's a shame. And we've seen this happen a lot. But we really got cheated out of one of the biggest fights that we could have seen in Wilder and Joshua when they were both undefeated. Right before Joshua fought Ruiz and right before Wilder fought Fury, that was probably the biggest fight in the game. And we can go back and forth of why it didn't happen. But that would have been a monumental fight. And at that time, I think picking the winner would have been hard. I think I would have taken Joshua back then before their Andy Ruiz fight. After that, I kind of lean to Wilder, but they're never going to fight now. And if they fight now, Joshua would be a huge favorite, and it really wouldn't mean anything if he beat him now.
No, history, because sometimes could be forgotten. The reason Wilder never fought Joshua was because of Joshua. Maybe not him. I'm sure Joshua would have stepped up and fought Wilder. It was Eddie Hearn. He wanted no part of Wilder. They avoided Wilder. Tons of excuses over and over and over was coming from Eddie Hearn. No ifs or buts about it. Joshua is at fault, just like Riddick Bowe is at fault for not fighting Lennox Lewis. And it's easy for me to say again, well, I'm sure.
I think Rock Newman had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, right. But want to know something, Mac? The fighter can make any fight happen if he wants, if he steps up. Case in point, Cus D'Amato didn't want Floyd Patterson, who he managed and trained to fight Sonny Liston. He never would have fought Liston. Floyd Patterson stepped up and he insisted. The fight had to be made, and then D'Amato walked away because Floyd overruled him. If a fighter wants a fight bad enough, okay, it'll be made.
Okay, and
yeah.
I mean, you could say that because Yank Durham didn't want Frazier to fight Foreman, and Joe was hell-bent on making the fight because he didn't want to fight Ali and split the money again. But, Jack, the only thing I'll say that is a little different, when the Bo Lewis fight was out there, Riddick Bowe had just beat Holyfield. He was young, and I think he was influenced by Rock Newman a lot, where Patterson and Frazier, by the time the Liston and Foreman fights were out there, they were both their own men and decided to make a decision. I think Bowe, who was like 26 or 27 then, kind of young, under the influence of Rock Newman. I think a lot of these guys do look to the managers, and I think that had a lot to do with it. I don't believe Bowe feared Lewis. I really don't.
No, usually one fighter doesn't fear the other, I don't think, where he would avoid a fight. And I
would have taken Bowe back then.
Yeah, I would have taken Lewis, but who knows? It never happened.
Would Lewis before Emmanuel Stewart, you would have taken to beat Bowe? I wouldn't have.
Yeah, well, who knows? Who knows what would have happened? Who knows who I would have picked right before the fight? But Lewis was more consistent. Keep in mind, Lewis did beat Bowe in the Olympic finals. It was stopped a little early.
Quick hook.
There was one more thing. You mentioned Yank Durham before. We only have a couple of minutes left. There was a post today that you commented on it. I saw by a writer, William Detloff, who said that Herbert Muhammad belongs in the Hall of Fame, in his opinion, who managed Ali. Is Yank Durham in the Hall of Fame? I forgot. The International Boxing Hall of Fame.
I don't know, Jack. I'm not sure.
Usually I know these things. If Yank is, I'll find out by next week. If Yank is not in, he absolutely belongs in, because Yank was a real fight manager. Herbert Muhammad was basically a one-trick pony. It was Muhammad Ali.
That's it.
And he took over Ali in 1966. Now, did he negotiate hard on Ali's behalf? Get the most money he could. I'll give him credit for that. He even left Don King and went to Bob Arum because he drove a hard bargain, Herbert Muhammad. But Yank Durham had...
Yank is in the World Boxing Hall of Fame.
Not international, is he? Wow.
No. Not that I can see, Jack. No.
Yeah, but Yank managed guys. He trained like Gypsy
Leotis Martin, Benny Briscoe, Gypsy Joe Harris, and Willie Monroe.
Well, no, I don't think he had Benny Briscoe. No, that was Russell's guy, I think Quenzel McCall.
No, he didn't manage. Right, he didn't manage him. He worked with him in a few fights, but he didn't manage him, right?
Yeah, he bought Bob Foster's contract late in Foster's career, and he managed him for a couple of his title defenses. But Yank was a real boxing guy. That would be the thing about it, And
Herbert Muhammad does not belong in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but Yank Durham, we could agree, does. I'm not going to
absolutely
comment on today. I got to think about that more. But Yank brought in Eddie Futch, for example, to assist with Smoking Joe Frazier. That was a great move by Yank to bring in like an assistant coach of that type of caliber.
And he
Okay,
leaned
well,
on
that's
Butch
it.
for picking some matches too.
Right. Okay. But in closing, we both picked Boots. I'm going to pick Boots in 4 rounds. You're going to pick them. Let's call the exact round.
You know what, Jack? I agree. I think 4.
4 rounds. Okay.
I think he's going to come out hard, and 5 is too close to Bud. He's going to do it in 4. 3 or 4.
So we'll see. Okay, Mac. Till next week. Great time.